Hi there, welcome back to the channel. So since the last time I did a video, I've been working on the drums, and they've been a little more complex than I thought, and this usually happens. It usually takes me 2 or 3 days to get a really good take, there's kind of a lot going on, and I remembered that one of the things that always happens to me, not always, but sometimes, and this could happen to you if you're trying to do what I was doing, it's sometimes difficult to play drums along to guitar already recorded for me. I don't know why, but it just doesn't work. So what I've been doing is just in here practicing, memorizing the arrangement, because what I do when I can't play along to a track very well, I'm just going to turn on the metronome. 120 is the beat I decided on, the beats BPMs, beats per minute, and so I decided on 120, and now I'm going to just practice it by memorizing the arrangement. And I do that a lot, where I'll just, okay, I do this 4 times, I do this 4 times, and I'm going to shift to this for a couple measures, you know, whatever. So I'm in the process of getting it right. Luckily, I did not delete the test stuff that I had recorded that evening. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a snare drum, which was the first track over here, recorded with the condenser mic, and we're going to take the bass drum, which is recorded also that night. I also have the other two, but I'll just do the snare and the bass drum, and I'll show you how to take those into Audacity, clean them up, rename the files, and then bring them back into Audacity using the computer connected to the machine. And I will show you how to do that. And also, I had a couple of questions submitted by a subscriber named Darren McCrae. Let me make sure I got his name right. Yeah, Darren McCrae. And Darren wanted to know if I could do a series of videos on recording directly to Audacity and leaving the Zoom out of play. And the answer is yes, I will do that. I'm going to look for some kind of cheap older interface, because I used to have one that worked with this computer. This is an older computer. It's about 10 years old, and I'm waiting to kind of upgrade to a better MacBook Pro. So this one is a little slower, and so I'll have to find an older one, you know. The newest stuff doesn't always work on these. And I like these because they have more connections, but ultimately I'm going to have to upgrade. But I'm just trying to ride this one out. So I will find a used interface, hopefully with 4 inputs, so we could do the whole miking. But if you only have 2 inputs, so Darren, if you have an audio interface at home right now that only has 2 inputs, remember that you can record the drums with just 2 mics. So you'd have your recorder man where your 2 sticks above the snare, and then you're equidistant on this side, aimed this way, into your interface, into Audacity. As long as you have good levels going into the interface, and you see the interface giving you good levels, same thing with Audacity. The only thing I would warn you about is you might want to have an outboard compressor as well, but we'll get into that. Well, I'll see. There might be a way around it. That's part of what I like about the Zoom, is that it has those effects already in there, so you don't have to have all this extra outboard gear. But you may be able to work around it. Who knows? I mean, you don't have to have compression to record drums, especially in that style, because you're not right up on the drums, so the signal is not quite as hot. So yeah, I'm going to do that as well. That would make a good series of videos for me to do, to learn something new, to be able to have some new video material to put up on YouTube, and it sounds like it would help Darren. But Darren, if you have an audio interface at home, you can do the same thing I'm doing here. You just eliminate the Zoom from the equation. You get really good levels on that interface with Audacity running, and it's actually doing the recording, and as long as your levels are good there, you can actually do the same thing I'm going to do tonight with the Zoom tracks. You would do that with your Audacity tracks. You just go back into Audacity, clean them up, rename them, and start building your song. So yeah, I think the hardest part of it would be the recording of the drums, which is the hardest part of anything to me as far as like studio work. The drums are the toughest, because it's the toughest thing to do well. So you know, I do my best, but I'm always playing and trying to get better. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to connect the Zoom to the computer. I'll show you how to do that. It's very simple. All you need is the cable that comes with the Zoom, which is like a USB cable here. I've already got it attached, and I use the 3rd USB port on these older MacBook Pros, if you happen to have one as well, as opposed to using the 1st slot that's closer to the back, or the 2nd slot. This 3rd one is supposed to be the best for importing and outporting any kind of audio information. I'm not sure why, but I just followed that. I read it on a forum, the Apple forum. So I plug it in there, and then the other end is like a proprietary end. It's like that square end, and it goes into the Zoom, and you'll see where it's supposed to connect. Now, once you've connected to the Zoom, the next step is to hit this USB button, and you'll notice it says Audio Interface, Reader, Storage. Now, The Zoom does work as an audio interface, but you have to use Cubase software. I tried it out. It wasn't my cup of tea, but that's another option. If you get a hold of the Zoom and you have Cubase, you can run your entire recording session with your computer, and the Zoom will actually be doing the work. Kind of cool. Okay, so we're going to go down to Reader in this case and hit Enter, and then that's when we'll see the USB come to life. So we'll see the little USB icon pop up. So now, here we go. I'll show you exactly what to do. Right, so now after plugging it in, setting everything up, you're going to see the Zoom R24 icon come up, and you're going to click on it. Open up the Zoom, go to Project, open that up. And now I'm going to go down and look for We Know. That's the name of my song on this particular recording, was We Know. It's in Audacity now. I'm going to go over, and the track looks good, but there's a few peaks there. So let's see what we need to do here. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little sample of the sound, go up to Noise Reduction. Good. Get the noise profile. That's letting them know what we're trying to get rid of. Go back up, repeat. You see it highlights the entire thing, and there's your noise reduction. Now we're going to go back up to Effect. And I'm going to just check and make sure nothing weird happened, because sometimes noise reduction can cause some strangeness. So now I'm going to get rid of all the sound that goes before those 4 stick clicks. And I'll go up to Generate and hit Silence. You can also hit Command L on a Mac. I'm not sure what it is on a PC. So that's quiet now. You won't hear any of that business. That's just extra noise we're trying to get rid of. And now here we are. We're going to go and just make sure that everything's okay with the track. I'm going to check it where the stick clicks begin. Good. Everything still sounds okay. Excellent. Now, next step, we're going to go back up to Effect. And I'm going to go to Classic Filters. And I have it set on 100 Hertz. It's the first one, the Type 1 filter. And you can do it, you can experiment with this. 100 works for me, and I even use that on the bass drum. And especially on electric guitars, it sounds great. But it really cleans up all that low stuff that you don't want rumbling around. Now we're going to go to Amplification, and it's a little hot, so I'm going to bring it back to -1.2. Hit OK, and look at that, we have nice levels now. Excellent. And now you can kind of check the playback and just make sure everything's sounding good. And it sounds fantastic. Everything is good. We're okay. And so at this point, I don't do much else. Now, you could do a lot more than that, of course. But what I do here is I'm just going to go to Export Audio. I'm going to rename it Snare 1. Because remember, I'm going to double the snare later. Snare Drum 1. Let's look over here at file type. That's important. Now I'm going 16-bit wave because the Zoom does not recognize any other file. But if you want to, your last file could be whatever you want it to be. You could go to other uncompressed files and you could choose 24-bit or 32 or whatever you want. Doesn't matter. But it originated in 16, so I just leave it in 16 because, you know, that's where it's going to be. Alright, so now I've exported. I'm going to close it out, and no, I'm not going to save those changes because I don't need them. I have the snare drum completed. I find it on my desktop. It's around here somewhere. Where are you? There you are. And I'm going to drag it into audio on the song We Know. And sometimes it'll get pulled up. I didn't do it right, so watch, I have to go get it. Once it loads, I'll grab it, and yeah, there you go. You bring it back down to where it belongs. Come back here, you. Get in that audio folder. All right, and then usually what I do is just open that audio folder up so that I don't have to keep doing that, because that'll happen. Now I'm taking the bass drum file, which should be number 3, because there's 4 drums. Good. It is. Okay, and that's what it is. It's the bass drum. I'll just hit play and make sure, yeah, that's what it is. Good, everything's fine, and it sounds okay. The levels look a little low, so let's just basically do the same thing we did with the snare. We're going to grab a little piece of the action to get a noise profile. Once we get that, we re-click so that the entire file will now be reduced. It's by a dB, just cleans it up, takes a little background noise away. Now I'm going to check it to make sure nothing weird happened, because that happens sometimes, you get weirdness. Now we're going to highlight the section that we want to silence, and that's either Command L or you go up to Generate and hit Silence, and then that goes away. Good. And now we'll just check and make sure we're okay here. Now we're going to go to the next effect, and we'll go to classic filters again. I'll go ahead and just do the same thing. I could drop it, I could make it 50 hertz or 40 hertz, whatever you want to make it. I find that this just cleans it up. I can always add bass in with the EQ. Alright, so now this one's way low, so I'm going to bring it to minus 1.2 as well. Just give it a little amplification. That looks good. Now check this out. This is a neat spot cleanup. I'm going to go to those higher peaks and just get those. Go back to amplify. This doesn't always work. You have to test it, but it usually these will work. And it just brings the levels back down to something reasonable. I'll maybe take 3 dB off. There you go. Hit OK and boom. And then watch this. I'll repeat it by just hitting Command V on the Mac, and you can also go up here and just hit repeat amplify under the effects panel, and boom, look at that, very uniform wave form. That looks good. All the peaks are kind of at the same spot, and I could even work on this some more and get it exactly the same, but I like the way it looks right now, so I think it's okay. So now I'm just going to double check and make sure the levels still look good. Those are nice levels. It's peaking at like -6, which is exactly what I want. I'm working the track, building the track with the same kind of levels so that at the end I sort of stay at this level. That's the goal. So now we're going to come out again, export audio, and we're going to rename this bass drum 1. And of course we'll have our bass drum 2, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. Okay, okay. Get out of there, then we're going to quit it. We don't need this file because all it'll do is save it as a project, and we don't need that. So now we're going to take that bass drum and drag it back in. And this time I made sure to hit it on the audio so it didn't load it at the top of the thing. Okay. And now I'm going to make doubles of these. I'm going to do my snare drum too, and all you have to do is go to the file on the desktop and rename it. There might even be a smarter way to do it, but I usually just rename it to. Put the period back so we don't mess up the file, drag it over here. Watch this, it's going to go in the wrong place. So what I'm going to do is just open this audio folder. That's the better way to do it, and then you just have space to drag it in without screwing up. Alright, so now as that's getting dropped into place, I am going to go to bass drum 2, and that's just renaming bass drum 1 and then dragging it in. And these are going in so quickly because they're short. If this was a full-length song that was 3.5 minutes long, these files would take a lot longer. My computer's kind of slow. So now we're going to drag. This is important. You'll mess up if you don't do it this way. Drag your zoom. Watch, it takes a minute sometimes to go away. It'll just sit there and just hang, but just be patient. You can even try it again. I found that if you keep the dialog box open and drag it, it seems to go out faster. Now, once you've done that, you need to go back to the zoom. You'll see that it says card reader and it's still active. You're going to want to go back to the zoom and hit exit. And then once you hit exit, you can now release the cable from your computer. So I thought that was a very simple way to clean up the tracks. And remember that if you are trying to do the same thing that I'm doing at the same time but leaving the zoom out, using an audio interface, getting into your computer in some way to get music onto Audacity, everything I just did, you could do the exact same thing. That could be your post-production process for recording strictly to Audacity. Now, the other thing I just wanted to add is that I could have done a lot more. Now, but remember, I decided I didn't want to compress the bass drum. I decided I didn't want to compress the rest of the kit. I have compression, some pretty heavy duty compression on the snare, because that's what's getting the thwack, and I found that compression gives the snare something special. And it works on the bass drum too if you're using tight miking, and in fact you almost have to have it. And if you're going to record bass guitar amps, it helps to have it there as well, because you get these big massive bass peaks, just overwhelming the microphone. So you need to have that signal compressed coming in, like it's almost like a limiter. So there's complexities. I had so much compression at the zoom that I don't want to recompress it here, right? I want to keep that nice open non-compressed sound. And we know the recordings that sound like this, these big open rock and roll recordings, they sound a little more, to me they're bigger and wider and more dynamic than when you take it and just crunch everything down, So I'm trying to avoid doing that. I also think that it makes it sound fake. You don't hear any air, you don't hear any room tone. When you've got everything like that. So that's what I do. I have so much compression going in that I don't do any compression. But if you're needing to compress, let's say you got kind of a weak signal. Let's say you do Recorder Man with your direct to Audacity method through an audio interface, and the drum just sounds a little like nothing. And let's say you don't have a compressor at home. Well, now you go in and you try compression. And if it sounds good, the steps for compression are thus that you compress, and then usually you want to normalize, because a lot of times the compression will bring the levels way up. If you go and normalize by a dB or so, then it just sort of puts it back in that band. But once again, I don't really love what it does. I only use it sparingly because it can really start to turn things mechanical and just very same sounding. So that's why I didn't use compression. But if I had, I would have compressed and normalized, right? And then there's a lot of times where I'll lightly compress the final mix, you know. So there's lots of uses for compression. I just didn't do it on this. I've learned where I use it judiciously, and or sparingly. How about that? So yeah. But it is amazing when it works. When it works, it's so right. It helps on vocals a lot of times. Sometimes you'll be stuck with a vocal, and if you compress it, there it is. But I usually do that on the way in. I don't usually post-production compress, because that's where you get into that like nasty kind of digital brick-walled sound that I'm trying to avoid. I want this to sound like analog, you know, like a nice open analog recording. That's the goal. So, and also like reverb, EQ. Now I have found that the EQ for me just gets out of control and out of whack on Audacity. So I just use light EQ that's in the Zoom, you know, and especially when I go do the mastering. So we're going to get into all that. We're going to cover all of it. There's a lot to cover. But it's helping me because I'm trying to get through a song that's going to go on my record. This will be the 5th song that's on my record, and then I have 5 more to record. It helps me to get back in the groove of recording songs. Like it's like putting on your work uniform and just going and going to work. It's work, you know. It's pretty much what it is. The creative part has already happened, and now you're just trying to document it as well as you can, and it's a lot of work. Okay, so now that's what we're going to do with drums, and I'm going to do that with every instrument. I'll do it with the bass guitar, I'll do it with the electric guitar, I'll do it with my vocal, and we'll take each step. So I'm going to kill this, you know, I'm going to put everything away, and then I've got to practice that tune because I'm hoping that I can come back tomorrow evening, knock that out. I'll be back to tell you about it, and then we'll move on to, say, electric guitars, and that'll be miking the guitars here, and I'll show you how to use the patches inside if you want to just use a model, you know, the sim of the amps as opposed to miking. That's a good way to keep your project quiet. The less times you have to use a microphone in a room that's not ideal, the less you're adding all this extra noise. The downside to it is I really like my amplifier. I built this amp, you know, with a specific sonic signature in mind. And in the same thing with the guitars I put together and build or whatever, I'm trying to get the most out of the situation. So I'm very big into this amplifier. But if I did not have one, I would not hesitate to use the modeling. There's a lot of really great guitar players who are using modeling now instead of amplifiers. I don't care, man. Whatever works for you. For me, I have to have a certain kind of magic. Who knows? It might come from digital stuff like that. But to me, it's like this whole world is my thing. So that's my thing. But I don't think it should limit anyone else. Maybe you're not into it, or you just don't have this stuff. It took me a long time to get all this stuff. It doesn't just fall out of the sky. It was a process, you know. So if you don't like your amplifiers, or if you don't care, record them in here. Just don't let anything stop you, because the most important thing is making music, not worrying about all this stuff. You're going to get better at all of this. Your recordings are going to get better, and your songs are going to get better. The important thing is to start working right now and get some stuff done. Rocking. All right. Thanks again. Next thing we'll do is probably electric guitars, but we'll talk about these drums again. Thanks for watching.